afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am super excited to be co-hosting this talk today. My name is Nicole Ballinghoff. I am a regional director at CAIO, and I would like to just do a brief introduction here. So Dr. Amanda Gulsrud is an associate professor in the Division of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. She's also a licensed psychologist who practices and specializes in autism and the development of behavioral interventions. She's the clinical director of the UCLA Child and Adult Neurodevelopmental, otherwise known as the CAN Clinic, which focuses on the evaluation and treatment of individuals with autism spectrum disorder across the lifespan. She also leads UCLA's participation in the SPARK study, a Simons Foundation Autism Research Initiative to help, which builds the largest genetic research cohort in the United States. Today, she's going to be presenting on genetics research in the SPARK study. I also have some participants of the SPARK team here, so they're going to be adding an interest form to the chat where you can sign up to receive further information and be connected with the team. And I just ask everybody, feel free to add questions to the chat throughout the presentation today, where we can answer some in real time if possible via the chat, and if not, we're going to have time for questions at the end. So I welcome Dr. Amanda Gulsrud. Thank you so much for being here. Like I said, she's going to present about the SPARK study, and then I'm going to follow up with some hallmarks of high quality ABA programs.
Fantastic. And Nicole, remind me, we have about an hour here?
Yes, we do.
Done? Okay. All right. I will zip through some of these slides and hope to have a conversation at the end. Feel free to put in those questions into the chat, and we are happy to help you. So today I'm going to focus in on the SPARK study. And so this is really a collaborative effort between our treatment center, the UCLA Center for Autism Research and Treatment, and the Simons Foundation out of New York, actually. And so my goals today are quite lofty, but I promise to be as quick as possible. I'm going to talk a little bit about what research is, the importance of it within the context of joining SPARK. Think about how SPARK does things like protect your information and confidentiality. Give you a little bit of cutting edge kind of information about what we know right now about genetics and autism, and also how SPARK gives back to families who are participating in our research. So to get started, what is scientific research and what is SPARK all about? So as many of you probably know, research really is just a learning and sharing process. It's really iterative. I as a researcher, a scientist, learned from families. Families learn from researchers. But good research does take time. And I think that can be the frustrating piece of this, is that you may participate in research and not really hear the results for a little while. It's because good research takes years and years to really conduct at a high quality level. In a basic way, data is collected to answer broader questions we may have. And in this case, it has to do with what causes autism spectrum disorder in your loved one. And then an important piece of research is that data should be shared back with the community and the family as well, in that kind of dialogue that we should have as good researchers. For SPARK in particular, data really is gathered through surveys that can be conducted online. I'm going to tell you a little more about that. And mailing of your family's saliva, which will contain that genetic material. We think of research as an opportunity for families to be engaged in science and be part of the process, help us answer really complex problems, but we also want it to be of benefit to you as well. So I'll go over some of those benefits a little bit later. So the mission of SPARK in particular is really to speed up that research, because we know it takes a long time to get answers. and to advance our understanding of autism and what causes autism. Our particular goal is to recruit families like yours, to engage you in this research process, but also to keep you involved. And overall, we'd love 50,000 families. I can tell you that we are now about 6 years in, and we're about halfway there. We're at about 30,000 families are participating, which is really exciting. But we still need more families participating. Families are going to enroll in the study online, so it's very convenient. You don't necessarily have to come to UCLA or see me in order to be enrolled. And so we hope that creates more opportunity for families who may not be so close to a university setting, but you can still participate. So again, we're recruiting these 50,000 families. One of your family members needs to have a diagnosis of ASD for your family to qualify. And we're collecting what we call phenotypic, which is behavioral data about how your loved one functions, language levels, etc. And then also that genetic material. And then what we do is we look at that genetic material and we start to identify genetic similarities between different individuals on the autism spectrum. And then we help engage you in other research opportunities as well that may be more fitting for the genetics findings of your particular loved one. Some things that Spark is not, and I want to be very clear about this. We are not looking for a cure for autism. In fact, we embrace autism and we believe in neurodiversity and inclusion of all individuals on the spectrum. About 10% of families at this point in time will get a genetic result. That means that we will have confidence that, in fact, the autism that presents in your loved one is related to a very specific gene. And we will tell you about that, and we'll educate you on what that means for your loved one and for your family. We're also not developing genetic tests for autism at all, although a lot of this data in a de-identified fashion will be available to researchers as part of that ongoing research collaborative. So how would you join? And this is where my research coordinator, Daniela and Raquel will also help you. So don't worry too much about the technical piece here. If you're interested in participating, we will be with you every step of the way and make it as easy as possible. So who is eligible? So participants need to live in the United States to participate. Unfortunately, we cannot have international families yet participate. At this point, participants need to be able to read and write and understand in English for the consenting process. I will tell you that if you are more comfortable in the Spanish language, know that Spanish Spark is coming in the next few months. And if you would like to wait for that, we actually have families on a wait list so that the second Spanish Spark is ready to go for you, you can have the website and all of the consents translated in Spanish. And both of my coordinators, I'm so lucky, also speak fluently Spanish. And so we can help you at that point. But right now we are restricted to people who are comfortable with the English language. Participants should be either an independent adult with ASD or the parent of a minor or a dependent adult with ASD. And biological siblings are also welcome to join. So it really can be, a family event, which has been really fun for some families to have their siblings participate as well. The individual with ASD has to have a professional diagnosis of ASD. We ask how that individual received that diagnosis. So you'll have to say, was it through a school eligibility or a clinical psychologist or some other setting, but we don't need the actual report necessarily in order for you to be included in the study. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for families. And this is our little infographic of how you would walk through your participation. So we would have you register online with your computer, your phone, your laptop, tablet at sparkforautism.org. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to consent to share data with us. And then you're going to enter in some basic information about your family. Then you're going to have a second consent where you consent for the genetics piece of the study. You're going to provide that saliva sample, and then you'll complete some exit surveys for us. And once we receive in lab that saliva sample, it will go through DNA sequencing. And it actually, what is great about this study is it will actually be reanalyzed every year as part of the cohort. And the reason for that is, at this point in time, we feel pretty good about identifying in about 10 to 20% of individuals with autism what that genetic causes, but we expect that number to increase a lot over the next few years. And so we want to keep analyzing your data, because as new discoveries are made, we want to communicate those findings back to you as the family. And then that last pathway to Simon's Searchlight is essentially that other research collaborative I was talking about, where, should you have a return of results for your loved one, we want to connect you to a broader community of families like yours, who may share common genetic pathways to autism. And these groups are really powerful advocates in the community and are great sources of support for your family. So here is the saliva kit, just so you know what ships to your home once you've enrolled online and put your mailing address. This kit comes to you with an infographic about how to do the collection. Of course, we're here for you every step of the way as well, just to remind you. So a lot of families say, I got my kit, come help me. I don't feel comfortable doing it myself, or I don't feel comfortable helping my child. We are there to help through the entire process. In fact, we will come to the home, we'll meet you at a location. You can come to UCLA with your kit. We try to make it as easy as possible. And just to reiterate, there's no cost to participating in Spark. And a lot of my families are surprised by this, because if you go ahead and do clinical genetics, there's often a large cost to that. Some insurances and more are covering it, but they're usually covering just like an initial type of genetic test called the chromosomal microarray. And this is full exome sequencing. So it gives us a lot more information about the genetics of your family. So how can we help you? I mentioned this before. Well, we can do a lot of different things. Right now, because a lot of people are virtual, we can do Zoom appointments with you. My coordinators can log on and you can share screen, and we can walk you through the process of enrollment. We can answer any questions you have. We can give you tips about how to collect that saliva, or we can actually, now we're so happy to be hopefully on the other side of the pandemic a bit, where we actually can help you more in person as well. And so there's a lot of options for that. And there will be more and more in the future. So stay tuned. Okay, next. How does Spark protect your information? I think this is a really important piece. We don't always think about this when we're participating in research, but I like to reiterate that, Spark takes your data and your information, and we want to protect it at the highest level. So everything that you enter is encrypted at all times. It's stored in a secure database. It's stripped essentially of anything that we call personally identifying information, so that, that data is housed separate from your identifiable information. And that's really important to add an extra layer of security for you. Now, only researchers with very specific access that have received training will ever have access to your data, and it'll all be de-identified as well. As an added protection. We also have the NIH, the National Institute of Health, has its certificate of confidentiality that we've adopted. So really, you as a research participant have ultimate control. You can withdraw at any time, you can participate at any time, and we try to be very clear about what that process is and what it means for your family. Okay, so this is kind of the fun part. Now that we've gotten through the basics of Spark and what it is, what have we learned so far? I did mention before that we're in our 6th year. So we have 5 years of data that have actually told us a ton already. And the research is really like lightning speed right now. So in general, we now have established very robustly that autism spectrum disorder has both genetic and environmental contributors. And why do we know this? Well, oftentimes we know this from families, from twin studies they're called, or sibling studies. So if you think about it, we know that identical twins who share 100% of their genetic information, right? If you share 100% of your genetic information, and if this disorder was 100% genetic, you would expect that concordance rate to be 100%. If one has autism, the other is for sure going to have autism. But in fact, it is high concordance, it's 77%, but that means there is some environmental contributors as well to autism. So identical twins, about 77% concordance rate, which means if one twin has autism, there's essentially a 77% chance the second identical twin will have autism. If you look at fraternal twins, though, this is really fascinating. They share the same environment prenatally, but they have different genetic makeup, right? They're more similar to siblings in their genetic makeup. Their concordance rate drops down to 31%. It's actually more similar to what a sibling concordance rate is at 20%. So we know that it's a complicated interaction between genetics in a family and also the environment. And when we say the environment, we're largely thinking about, that prenatal environment and exposures for that young developing fetus. So this is just another explanation of that kind of complex interaction. We have the genetic influence, which is either inherited through the family or what we call de novo, and I'm going to explain what I mean by de novo in the next slide. These are the genetic factors that contribute to autism. And then there are also those complex environmental factors. And so examples of those that, epidemiological studies have been looking at, rates in different environments, things like the influence of, air pollution, maternal illness or infection during pregnancy, things like levels of folic acid and taking of medications during pregnancy. All of this may play a role. Now, autism is not 100% environmental, so we really think about it as potentially a genetic vulnerability paired with an environmental insult or interaction that may push us over the edge to having something like a neurodevelopmental disorder like autism. And in fact, in these large genetic population studies, we have really found that the genetic contribution to ASD is very high, at about 80%. And so these combined interactions are really something that we know less about. What we know more and more about is actually the purely genetic pathways or mechanisms for autism. And so I said that I would talk a little bit about these de novo genetic changes. De novo means new. And what that means is that actually that genetic change did not occur in the mother or in the father. So when we test the genetics, we don't see the same marker in mom or dad. It's actually new or de novo in the individual with ASD. So the change occurred, during fertilization, germination. It wasn't passed down. And these de novo changes are actually quite common. One of the hallmarks is that, in our families that come in to see us, it was always hard to explain why maybe one individual had autism, but the other siblings did not, right? Sometimes when you see a family like that, it may point to something like a de novo mutation in that individual with autism. And we think that they're relatively common. About 20 to 30% of individuals with autism currently were able to discover this de novo change. And so we're really interested in that type of genetic pathway, and really trying to identify those causal genes that contribute to autism. And so to date, I mentioned that we're trying to get to this 50,000 goal, but we have actually collected and analyzed on about half of that, about 24,000 individuals with autism and their families. And roughly we have a positive turn of result, which means we are definitively positive that we understand and know the genetic cause for about 10% of those families. And so we are communicating back these findings as quickly as we can. We're getting better at our timeline for this, and for providing education for our families as well. Because it's one thing to know that we have identified the cause of autism in your loved one, but it's another thing to truly understand what that means and to think about supports for your family from there. And so just our study in the last few years has actually discovered 27 new genes that are linked to autism. So we're really contributing right now to the knowledge base, and it's a really exciting time for families to participate in this process. Again, those de novo changes are a large portion of this for us, about 20 to 30%. Of our families will have these de novo genetic changes, but we really think that there are still several hundred genes that are linked to autism that are yet to be discovered. And so, we've discovered a few, we've contributed to the larger scientific body of what we know about autism, but we believe that there's a lot more that needs to be understood. And so we need to actually enroll many more families to contribute to this. And so if you think about our return of results so far, we've identified in the last few years 27 new genes. They are added to an existing list of 178 genes and copy number variants that we have scientific certainty are linked to autism. And so this is our actual list. It is available. Some of our families have science backgrounds and are really interested in what these genes are and how they're related to the brain and development. So this is actually available on our website if you want to learn more about these genetic changes that are associated, we know with certainty, with ASD. And so what we do is we confirm a medical genetic diagnosis that goes through a certification process in our clinic, and then that genetic information is shared with you, the result, through the use of a genetic counselor, because we really feel like that result should be communicated to you in the most professional way possible. And so this just shows you in that consenting process how you are actually consenting to receive that information back. And you have the option of hearing about that genetic information, should we discover it, or opting not to hear about it if you're just interested in participating in the research. And so I mentioned that we really want to be clear about how we're communicating information back to families. Well, these are some of the guidelines we've developed for some of our most common genetic changes, and we try to provide education and materials along with the genetic counselor's explanation so that you really understand what this means for you and your family. So another piece of this work that is incredibly important to us and lends that idea of Spanish Spark and trying to get more and more people enrolled is increasing diversity of our sample. And so we recently, became very aware that we had just much larger percentages of white Caucasian families. In general, many more white and Caucasian families participate in this type of research. And we really want to do a better job of increasing the diversity and engaging our typically underrepresented families into this type of research. And so this is just a graphic of by race, how you can see that we're just doing a much better job of enrolling certain types of families, our white Caucasian, even our Hispanic families. We're doing less well at, engaging our Black and African American families, our Asian families. And so we're particularly interested in addressing this disparity in our work in Spark. And so we've thought of different targeted strategies. UCLA in general it is a mission of mine and of our center to increase representation across our network. And so there are lots of ways that we are trying to do that. One is we want to come to you in the community. And so we will have, again, I'm really hopeful soon that we will have gatherings that we call live registration events where families can meet us at a local park or a community center or a library, and we're there and we're ready to help you enroll. What's nice about that is when you enroll on your own, you have to wait a couple of weeks for that saliva kit to come. But when you do it with us on site or wherever we are, we come with those kits in hand and we can collect that information on the spot. And so there's no waiting for you. And we really try to do this, in a fun way, providing lunch and having fun activities for the family. And so it's a positive experience for everyone. And then what do we particularly give back to you? And that's important to me as a researcher, that I'm communicating with you and that families feel that their participation is valuable and is meaningful. And so we're constantly developing tools and data that will help describe our samples so that families who are interested in kind of the scientific piece, what the sample looks like, who's participating in Spark, we can really get that information to families in a clear way. And so we have tons of tools and infographics on our site. We also have surveys. I mentioned, at the end of your enrollment and after you've collected your saliva, we ask you to fill out some surveys. These online surveys, actually, we score and we provide individualized data summaries for you as well. And families really love this because they log on to their dashboard. We call it their dashboard. And you can follow and track where your kit is in the mailing and sequencing process. You can also look and see, what surveys you've completed, and then we can score some of those surveys and give you information. So over time, you can look at your loved one's changes and scores, and really a lot of our families print these and share them with clinicians and their treatment teams as well. And so here is the process by which families are connected also with other research. I mentioned that we don't want you to just do this one time and then, we never hear from you again. We want to engage you in a broader research community. And so we have a program called Research Match, which I'll describe a little bit. But this idea that once you're engaged and you're interested in this work, we want to find other programs and research that you may be wanting to participate in. And so researchers across the country can apply to, essentially present their research to you all because you're part of our network. And all of these studies are peer reviewed by our community advisory board, and all of the studies we might ask you in the future to participate in have, we think, high scientific merit and align with our larger goals. And so here's an example of some of the really cool studies and research that have come out of the Spark network. So it's genetics plus a ton more. So topics such as sleep and diet, early access to care, brain injury, sensory, parental stress. That one's mine, actually. I'm interested in how stressful this whole experience is for families and providing better supports. Challenging behavior, gender differences. You can just imagine how many options there are for you to participate. And of course, you have to opt in to any additional research you do. So you can ignore it, or you can say, hey, this actually sounds really interesting to me. I'll click on the link and say I want to participate. And so 78 other research studies have been approved, and we're really growing our participation rate, which we're really excited about, and building that community that we think is so important. And really, participants have had high satisfaction. This is not a huge burden. They love participating in other research. And again, remember, most of it's online, and so families can do it when it's convenient for them, and in the comfort of their own home. And so this is some of the data that's come out of that particular type of research. So just to confirm, there's the Spark Genetics study, there's surveys that you can participate in as part of that study, and then there's also other research opportunities through our broader network that you can also participate in. So if you want to keep participating in the Spark community, there are ample ways to do that. And so overall, and in summary, so hopefully I can have a little conversation after this, and then I know Nicole wanted to have a few minutes of your time. What's in it for you? This idea that you're joining a national community of families like yours. Almost 90,000 people with autism have contributed their DNA. That 25,000 was trios, which means individual with autism and both biological parents. If you look at just the number of individuals with ASD, we're at almost 90,000, which is really impressive. We want to enhance our knowledge, but we also want to empower your families. You also receive an Amazon gift card of up to $50 when you participate. For some of our families, and particularly for my teams that participate in this research, they love the $50 Amazon. We want to keep you up to date on new discoveries. That's why we keep reanalyzing data and communicating with you. Should we have a genetic finding, you will receive that formal genetic diagnosis through our medical team. And then you'll also receive personalized reports from those surveys you complete, and you can complete those over time so that you get kind of a nice sense of development over time as well. And so we really think that all of this adds some nice value to your existing programs and can even help your providers as well track progress and change. So this is our particular URL to participate. At UCLA, when families in the greater Los Angeles area enroll, it automatically through zip code affiliation does send your information to us so that we can help you. Or you can go onto this personal URL as well. And you can also email us or call us at any time, and follow us on social media. You can do the whole thing, and we're happy to help you, and we're eager to help you. We're eager to have personal contact again because it's been so hard lately. I just want to end with a few additional resources from our center. We have COVID-19 information and resources on our website. We have some educational videos that we've created during this time. You can get copies of these slides, so you can look at these links. We really want to provide support, so and are interested in hearing from you. So we certainly hope that we do. I think there might have been, Nicole mentioned a link that was sent. Is that right, Nicole, in the chat, that families can either fill out or?
Yes, it was sent in the chat, and we'll add it again for anybody who joined a little late.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I see that there, it's funny, I couldn't see my chat while I was talking, or because sorry everyone, when you screen share, it blocks out everything else you see. And so I was in presentation mode, but now that I don't have to be, I think I'll get out of that and I'll look at the chat. And was there some communication going on then?
Yeah, so I was just thinking initially, maybe if you could review how many locations are involved in the study nationwide.
Sure, absolutely. Well, Daniela might have to correct me on this. I think it's 27 clinical sites across the country, but the exciting thing is every year they add more locations geographically because we want to make it easier for families to participate. So so we are one clinical site. There are actually several other in the state of California and then across the nation.
Wonderful.
And then I'm correct. Yay, I'm correct. I remembered that fact. Okay, 27 clinical sites.
Perfect. And then a few people questions coming in is, can you go into a little detail about how participants with autism have provided saliva? In other words, do they have to be able to spit?
Good question. Oh my goodness. Okay, so if you saw that picture I showed you, that is the classic tube that you spit into, and you have to like spit up to the line. And our parents are usually pretty good at this. Our loved ones with autism, depending on their ages and abilities, not so much. And that's where we come in to help. So if there is any problem at all, we also have cheek swabs that we can use. So just know that just because, don't think you're disqualified because your 2-year-old newly diagnosed can't spit. A lot of us can't spit that way. And so we have cheek swabs that are really easy that we can use with you. But we as coordinators, my coordinators have to help you with that. And so just know that that is available to you as an option as well. Cheek swab or spit.
And then somebody asked if they get detailed results as participants. So I'm assuming maybe as the parents, not the individual with autism.
So yes and no. So you will consent to whether you want information about yourself and about the individual loved one you're consenting on behalf of as well. And the reason why is that I had mentioned that, a lot of what we've been discovering or we feel really confident about are these de novo or new mutations that don't seem to occur in the biological parents, but are in fact present in the individual with autism. But there are also hereditary pathways or inherited pathways. And so we will clearly communicate that if that is in fact the finding for your family. So if you have a genetic, predisposition that was passed down to your loved one, yes, that type of information is shared.
Great. Also, how many of these genes does a typical person with ASD carry?
How many, sorry, repeat that because now I'm getting distracted. I'm seeing all these things pop up. I'm like reading as I'm like so excited. Okay, repeat. I won't do that anymore.
How many of the genes does a typical person with ASD carry? So I guess out of that list that you shared.
Good question. Okay, so, and I'm not a geneticist. I apologize. I know a fair amount through the years, but I don't know everything about this. But those 178 genes I talked about, usually the individual will be identified with one of those pathways. So like think about like right now we're pretty confident there's like 178 different pathways to the same autism, which is crazy to think about genetically, but it happens a lot in a lot of different disorders. So usually your pathway is clearly one of those identifiable pathways, or we haven't discovered it yet. Right? Remember, there's a whole bunch of families that we aren't able to return results for because we just don't have the information yet. And that's why we keep analyzing this data, because as our knowledge increases, we're able to properly identify more and more families.
Great. A few questions came in noting that the family has already done genetic testing through their traditional medical path, asking if they should still participate in this study.
Oh, great question. And the short answer is absolutely. There are some advantages to that. Now, I like to tell families that they should always do both, because clinical genetics provides a one-time snapshot for you. It will tell you at this point in time, yes or no, we know a genetic pathway. Usually it is a test called the chromosomal microarray, right? Which provides some information, but it can be limited information. And so what's nice about participating in Spark is it is essentially providing the Cadillac of genetic, testing. So it's usually a bit more comprehensive than your classic clinical genetics. But remember, we keep reanalyzing that data, whereas in clinical genetics, it's usually a one-time. So you get a answer right then, but a lot of times your answer is, we just don't know. So if you participate in Spark, you will get that information, we hope, eventually. And we'll recontact you should we have a reliable return of results. So absolutely, the fact that you've done clinical genetics does not disqualify you. I think all the more reason for you to be a part of a national network that is continually doing this work.
Yeah, that's great, because somebody did note that they sent in their DNA about 5 years ago. Just this past year, they got something stating that there, I guess, were no genetic findings, but they do still continue to complete the surveys and hope to learn more.
Exactly. So I will say that we have gotten a lot better. I appreciate that family giving that feedback. So at least initially in the study, the pipeline was long. And as we have done this more and more, our timeline has narrowed to really help families. And the families that actually were able to give return of results to are the ones where it's very clear right away. It's the families that, and it's actually the majority of families that we just don't have enough information about. Those are the families that take a long time, because we want to be certain we don't have a finding right now, but we also want to continue to analyze that data and give you information should we have it.
Great. Yes, and then one of those families thanking us that the report wasn't very helpful, but it gave them some peace of mind as well.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. Like, we're trying to refine our process. We know it's not perfect, but for those families that do have a genetic finding, I think it can pretty quickly put you in a pipeline for more kind of education and support. For the families that don't, you're going to wait a little bit longer, but know that, when we do have a finding for you, if we do, we will communicate that.
Wonderful. And somebody asked, what if you use an egg or a sperm donor?
Yeah, so we've had, obviously a fair number of these. And I think there is a way to tell us that in the portal, although Daniela might have to tell me. It does not disqualify your loved one with autism, because remember, you could, in theory, just enroll that one person. It may mean that your data is not included in the analysis because it's not as relevant for like the genetic piece, but we still can learn a lot just from the genetics of that individual with autism. So I would still encourage you to participate, and there will be options for you to explain that in the enrollment process.
Wonderful. Somebody also asked if the Spark study is going to be communicating findings with legislative leaders since there are so many challenges that families with ASD are facing.
Yes, I mean, the Simons Foundation has been very active for many, many years, politically and in shaping the way funds, flow about autism research. Actually, Jim Simons, the creator, has a granddaughter with autism, and so this is really a passion of him and his families. And so I think that is our goal as researchers, but this foundation also feels strongly about raising that awareness and education, making meaningful policy changes. And we need families, to be involved in that. We actually have a community advisory board if families want to be more involved in shaping that and affecting policy. We welcome our family community members to join.
Wonderful. Also a question about, is there a correlation between the 10% with a genetic result and the severity of ASD or with particular phenotypes?
Yeah. And again, in general, yes. I don't want to be too oversimplified in this, but many of these rare genetic mutations or de novo mutations are linked not only with autism, but also intellectual disability. So these individuals can at times present more severely. And, if you have a more severely affected loved one, there are some data suggest that you may have a genetic finding more easily than in individuals where the pathway may be more complicated or inherited in some way. And so, yes, there's something to be said for that carrying some weight in how those results are returned.
Great. And then there are a few more questions coming in, and keep those questions coming. I am going to quickly share some information about hallmarks of quality ABA therapy programs. And like I said, keep the questions coming in and we'll answer those as we wrap this one up. So we're just going to talk about ways to choose a provider, some considerations to make along the way, and how to determine high quality ABA or applied behavior analysis. So a little bit about us at CAIO and what we do. We are a team of approximately 600 professionals in the behavioral health field. So we have behavior analysts, program supervisors, behavior technicians, and administrative staff. We provide ABA therapy in home, center, and via telehealth. We offer parent training, behavior consultation, and school and community shadow support. We're currently serving in 7 different states, with more being added throughout the upcoming year. In California, we serve the San Francisco Bay Area, Sacramento, Los Angeles metro area, and San Diego. In Oregon, we're serving Portland and Salem. In Washington, we're serving the Seattle and Tacoma areas. We're serving Salt Lake City, Utah, Phoenix, Arizona. In Colorado, we're serving Denver and Colorado Springs. And in Texas, we're now serving Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, and Houston. So it is hard to choose a provider. There are many different agencies that offer ABA therapy, and it might be hard to pick just one. It might be hard to tell what therapy will look like from a website. Availability and wait lists can often be a barrier in locating services. And oftentimes the person you're speaking with for that intake call is not someone assigned to work with your child directly. Here are some things to consider when making a decision. How long has the BCBA been in the ABA field? Do they have experience with the style of ABA that you're seeking for your child? Does your child benefit from a perky, boisterous behavior technician or a calm, quiet behavior technician? What style would your child be most successful with? Would an adult-directed service be more appropriate, more of that discrete trial teaching, or a developmental and naturalistic approach? You also want to ensure that goals are developmentally appropriate. Convenience plays a big factor as well. How easy or difficult is it to change the time or location of a session, change a therapist, communicate with scheduling? get in contact with client services or your clinical team. Is the location convenient for your family, whether that be home, center, school, or community based? And you also want to look at outcome monitorings. How does the agency measure its effectiveness of their applied behavior analysis? Each of these is going to contribute to the overall effectiveness for your child. How can you find out and determine if your ABA team is high quality? Is your child excited to see their behavior technician? Do they light up with a smile during activities? Did caregivers have input in the goal selection? How much impact will these new skills have in the life of your child? Are sessions individualized to include your child's interests, and to what extent? So a basic level would be for them to be selecting items that motivate your child as the reinforcers. A more advanced approach to this would be designing lessons around your child's interests and incorporating them into the session and the goals. How much time do the clinicians devote to parent training and supporting the family? How many learning opportunities are provided each minute? Is the pace of instruction rapid? You have to really balance pace with that naturalistic teaching. And our motto at CAIO is make every moment count. What new skills did the child develop over the course of a 6-month authorization or 6 months of treatment? What's the foundation of CAIO's ABA therapy? We do really a blending of both models of behavioral and naturalistic development. So we want to look for what's developmentally appropriate, implement goals naturalistically, use child preferred materials, and learn through play, all while using the behavioral strategies. So being very data placed, presenting clear learning opportunities, and using a rapid rate of instruction so the children have more access to those goals and are able to make progress. At CAIO, we continuously strive to provide meaningful and effective ABA therapy for our clients and their families. As such, we hold ourselves accountable to driving meaningful and objectively measurable outcomes to the family can see and feel. We use 2 different measures to measure outcomes with our clients. We track both the progress toward achievement of learning goals that were set by the clinical team and family. We also track each client's individual progress on the standardized assessment, the Vineland-3, which is an objective measurement tool that allows us to monitor progress and gains across communication, socialization, and daily living skills. We're incredibly transparent with our families with regard to both the progress that is being made across these measurements, and believe firmly in having open and engaging dialogue surrounding them with the clinical teams and our families. ABA therapy should always be convenient and easily accessible for our families. CAIO has developed a first of its kind provider matching tool that allows families to book times that work for them, select clinicians that match their needs, and easily reschedule sessions in the event of an unexpected cancellation. Making ABA convenient for families has an untold amount of benefits. However, we're excited and dedicated to provide services that are not only effective and meaningful, but also enable the child and family to have time for themselves and for other commitments that exist. This leads very nicely into our next pillar. So CAIO's motto, make every moment count, reflects our mission of promoting effective and efficient learning that is tailored to the child. We take the time to assess and understand the client's unique personality, profile, and preferences, which we can use to drive forward the implementation of treatment goals and schedules that both optimize progress and allow for family time. As mentioned before, we continuously measure the child's outcomes and adjust our treatment plans and schedules accordingly to maximize the potential of child's progress. At CAIO, we understand the value that family time is a crucial ingredient in the development of individuals with autism. There are very few true comparisons, really. So we do strive to preserve that family time that occurs outside of therapy and find the balance and the therapy schedule that encourages that, all while maximizing the child's progress over time. We offer complimentary behavioral consultations or ABA therapy enrollment appointments at caiocare.com/consultations. And there's our phone number and email address as well to learn more. I am going to stop sharing and check back in. I know there were still a few more questions, and as I noted, please feel free to add any more you have throughout. Okay, another spark question. Do some, I guess this is questioning, is there any difference between the spark research sites? If they're not feeling like they're getting much information from one, is it an opportunity to register with a different site, like such as UCLA?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we're fairly similar, but I think what each site does a little differently is how we provide individual support for families. We've tried to kind of make it a bit more of a mission to be more interactive, and so in that way, you might have more personalized attention. Some of our families need other types of referrals, and we can help to provide that. That's certainly possible. So the unfortunate thing though is I think that once you're enrolled in one site, you can't really also enroll in a second site. You might be able to change your affiliation, which you could look into, but you can't like sign up twice.
Okay, great. And then another question, have you found any correlation between assisted reproductive technologies such as IVF and autism?
You know, it's interesting. I'm good friends with one of our pediatric geneticists here, and he always gives a seminar every year. And we're all so interested in like, you know, this correlation because, you know, you would think that it really would be robust. And there's some very, very small correlations between certain types of procedures, particular ITSI, I think it's called. But in general, it's not as robust as you would think. The more kind of robust indicator is actually not the procedure you use, but more advanced paternal age. And the reason for that is as the male, you know, ages, his sperm also ages and deteriorates, and it's more likely that that sperm will carry copy number variants that could be passed on.
Okay. Let's see, I think there's one more.
These are great questions. You have a very informed group of parents. I'm impressed.
Yes, somebody noted that the genetics department had some findings with the microarray test, but asked for a contact if they wanted to speak with somebody from Spark in more detail.
Sure. In fact, what I would suggest is if you have a known genetic result and you have not yet enrolled in Spark, enroll and let us know, and we'll try as best we can to, you know, streamline that process for you so that you can get access. In fact, if you have a result on a microarray, it suggests that maybe we should do more advanced testing anyway, and so you would be able to do that through the Spark study. So please feel free to contact us through that link, and we'll help you enroll.
Wonderful. I just added that link again to the chat. And I believe we have another minute or so if anybody else has any further questions. But I want to thank you, Dr. Gulsrud, for being here today, sharing this really important information with our families, and thank all of everybody for attending, and feel free to reach out with any more questions.
Please feel free to reach out to us, even if you have questions that you didn't have answered. You know, we're here to help, and we look forward to meeting you, and maybe even in person, and having more fun community events in the future.
Yes.